I'm Jessica Lawrence. I'm the CEO of Girl Scouts of San Gorgonio Council, which is based in Southern California. The panel's called Revel in a Polyester Sash, Rehabbing Corporate Culture. And the whole concept is that a lot of people talk about organizational culture, but a lot of times they're talking about it from the perspective of a startup company that was really able to form whatever cool, hip culture they wanted from the very beginning. And not a lot of people talk about dealing with changing culture in an organization that's been around for a long time and is really established. I care a lot about revolutionizing the way that we all work, because I think that in a lot of ways, you know, I was even indoctrinated and trained to work a certain way just from being in the workforce for a couple of years. Yeah. And I think that I've seen that it had a really negative impact on me just as a human being working that way, because I was very much of the mindset of like turning off who I was when I got to work and putting on like my work face and my work personality. And I didn't like having completely separate work and personal lives. Like it felt like I could be a more complete person and like enjoy life more if I was able to integrate those things better. And I think doing that requires that you have a work environment that's pretty laid back and has a really cool culture. And like it didn't feel good to me, but in some ways I had kind of like resigned myself to like, oh, well, I guess this is just kind of how working in a corporation is. And then I started reading more about how other companies function, and I was like, well, wait a minute, like there are other people doing this, like working in big corporations, and it doesn't have to feel like this. Story of Best Buy and how Jody Thompson and Callie Resler helped them switch from becoming a pretty traditional corporate environment to becoming a results-only work environment. And so they, in their book, Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It, they outline that transformation into a results-only work environment. And I think that, for me, it made so much sense to me when I read the book. I actually bought the book on my way to vacation and like read it on the plane, and I got off the plane and I called our HR person and I was just like, we have to do this. Like, go buy this book. By the time I come back from vacation, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to figure out how we're going to do this. Because the whole premise is that you allow people to work wherever they want, whenever they want, as long as the work gets done. And that was so opposite of how we had been working before. But I came across this book like 3 months after I became CEO, and I was just struggling with people just having like really low energy and low engagement and not being very creative and innovative, and just seeming like it was like there was some glimmer of hope still in their eyes that like things would get better, but they would kind of like had all of that passion kind of beaten out of them over the years because they just gave up after. If you always have to run all of your ideas through the higher ups and always have somebody who's like basically knocking it down, at a certain point you just give up trying to be creative and like pushing your ideas forward. So when I read this, I was like, okay, this is perfect because it's going to be that like huge jolt and kickstart because it's so different from how we work now or how we were working at the time. So so that was the primary motivation. And then once that changed, then I started looking at other companies like Zappos. It was a huge influence on us. I noticed when we started looking at Zappos culture, there were lots of parts of it that we were really intrigued by and loved, but there were other parts of it that we just felt like, but that's not totally us, because they're very kind of party centered and like to do a lot of celebrating and all of that, and being Girl Scouts, like that didn't work for us quite at that level. And so I think it's also interesting to help people understand the spectrum of positive culture, and that it doesn't have to be like, you know, partying all the time and all of this kind of stuff in order to have a good corporate culture. There's a lot that can happen in that spectrum.
Right. So what are some of the things that you maintained about the Girl Scout culture, you know, and incorporated it into the new model?
So I think for us, you know, some of it has just been about, like obviously there's a perception that like we're, you know, a very good kind of healthy, holistic kind of organization that's and so we had to be really careful not to destroy that completely, because there are 5-year-old girls that are looking up to the people that work for our organization, and it's not going to be helpful for us to have like, you know, pictures splashed all over the place of us partying everywhere. And so although we really relaxed our culture a lot and started socializing a lot more with each other at work, I think all of us still know that we still represent Girl Scouts, and so we're going to make choices about the types of events that we have or the types of socialization that we do that are probably different than what Zappos can do. And I've actually had this conversation with some of our staff about the fact that like things that totally fly, and nobody even bats an eye at a company like Zappos. If we were to ever do some of those things, it would be like scandalous. And so I think there's some of that. I think there's definitely, obviously, there are a lot of traditions in Girl Scouting that have been around for a really long time. And so, you know, a lot of the basic sort of premise of Girl Scouts in terms of being kind and being generous and all of those things are things that we've tried to work into our core values. And I definitely, like, I'm not, I'm very much, like, based on tradition. I grew up in New Hampshire. Like, I love old things. I love things that have continued on for a long time, but I'm also, like, not stuck on things. There are a lot of things in Girl Scouts that people get very stuck on, the symbolism of different things and the symbolism of a uniform and all of that. And I think I feel like the organization and the passion that people have for it is something that resides kind of more in your heart and in your mind and not so much in whatever uniform or stuff you have on. And so I think for us, some of that's been trying to integrate more of that feeling into how we act every single day, as opposed to like sort of the outward show of whatever that tradition is. It was interesting because when I did the panel last year, just talking about results-only work environments, people were really interested in kind of the rest of the story and the rest of our story in particular, because I was part of a bigger panel. There was only like snippets of little pieces of the story that people could hear. And it was interesting because our VP of marketing, she was there with me and she was sitting up front and watching the Twitter stream while the presentation was happening, so she could see what people were interested in and reacting to. And so some of that influenced what I wanted to talk about more, because people seem to be really interested in the overall culture change and how you get something like that started, how you support it once you get there.